Hey, Danny, it's so good to see you.
Oh, so good to see you too. How are you feeling, my friend?
As I said, not entirely 100%, but getting there. I've still got my voice back. I lost my voice for 4 days, but here we sit. Folks, let's get into it. Welcome to it. It's another week, and it's time for Doing It Sober Live with myself, Chris Snell. But it's important, if not more important, the ever luscious Daniela Park. I'd like to thank everyone for forgiving me for being absent. I was struck with a bronchial infection, which left me without a voice for the better part of 5 days. But by grace, we sit back here and hopefully we'll be around for a very long time. But it just goes to show that you put up something here that I want to read out loud here. 16 sodium atoms walk into a bar. It's appearing slowly, followed by Batman.
What?
Because I was about to say I'm not a superhero. But we have a superhero in our midst, and her name is Kezia. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. If not, Kezia, it must be something to the effect of Ketsia, or I did say Kezia, isn't it? But let's get into
Yeah.
it. We all hear that timeless slogan of finding our own place under the stars. But yet, ultimately, where do we fit in the world? And we mean not to be in like Errol Flynn, mind you. But most importantly, Michael Ironside once said if you can't afford to go anywhere, you can physically go everywhere within the confines of a book. And even include a name like Kezia Calvert at your side, you can go anywhere while sprinkling some fun in between. Kezia joins us today on DIS Live to talk about recovery, her love of storytelling, and using her superpower to help aspiring writers worldwide, amongst other bread and butter topics. Kezia, welcome.
Thank you so much. Is the sound okay?
Yay.
You hear me?
The sound
Thank
is
Welcome.
absolutely perfect. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. I've never used this app before, so this is all new for me. So pretty cool.
Hey, it's
Yeah.
new
Well,
for
it's a
us
first
too.
for
So,
everyone, I reckon.
Yes.
Kezia,
No.
tell us a little bit about your story, just quickly, in roughly about 60 seconds. You'll start from addiction, past, and then up until the present, where you said, "All right, enough is enough. There has to be something better."
Okay, so brief synopsis. My drinking didn't become a problem until I became a single parent. When my daughter was about 10 months old, she's 7 now. Um, and it kind of was condensed into those, I guess, 4 or 5 years of being a single parent. I'm now married. And it quite quickly became a problem. So I've been sober since the day after Halloween 2020, coming up on a year and a half.
awesome.
Yeah. And I, now I do a lot of things, but I run my own business, which is something that was
Hmm.
never a possibility when I was in active addiction.
Frightening,
So
isn't it?
yeah. It wasn't even a dream then, I don't think. So, yeah.
Well, it's
That's,
surprising how in recovery the gifts ultimately keep on giving, if you get what I'm saying. Where you initially thought, I can't do this. This thought of doing that venture is absolutely bloody scary. But if you let go and you actually let it materialize and let it work itself out naturally, be it 1 month, 6 months, 6 years, you ultimately discover an adventure that takes upon a life itself. And you think to yourself, if I didn't let this happen, I wouldn't have achieved what I have today. Was that something in that sort of experience when you began your own venture?
absolutely. It was an idea that came to me probably about 6 months into my sobriety journey where I wanted to share the gift of writing and how that had impacted my sobriety journey with other people, but I wasn't able to find a community that was out there. So I thought, I'll just start offering free workshops. So I did that, and then the community grew, and all of a sudden
That's great.
it was kind of a beast of its own where it was like I had to do it, you
I
know.
see.
Hmm.
Right, sure. Well, I mean,
I
I've said
think we
this to a
get
couple of friends. Sorry, Danny,
go right
you
ahead.
spoke. Your turn. No,
I
ladies
just
first,
I
dogs
feel
last.
I feel like when I got sober, Kezia, it's like you get sent these messages that are pretty much undeniable, and like for me, I tried to resist doing it sober, and I didn't want to do it, and I was getting bad feedback and one visitor a month on my site, and I just can't do this, and fear, and 1,000 forms of it. And then it just kept pushing on me and pushing on me naturally. And so I love that we get to have all these opportunities when we're sober. And it seems like you have really capitalized on all of the benefits of sobriety in such a short period of time. You,
Yeah.
So do you usually work with people that are in recovery, or is this writing thing open to everybody?
It is open to everybody. I think I initially started growing my community like through I have two Instagram accounts. One is the sobriety one, and the other one's like a writing one. And I think I initially, basically all the people I knew from when I was in active addiction were no longer in my life when I got sober. So the only people I had to build the business from was the people in my sobriety community. So it kind of just worked out that that was the bulk of who they were. But now, because I advertised on Eventbrite and stuff, people came from like all around the world, and they sort of, it just became something else. So now I have like a women's only meeting, and then I have a co-ed, and then I'm offering like book club meetups. I'm doing my first one next month for a sobriety based book.
I saw.
Yeah. So that just kind of all these ideas, like you said, Daniela, they just keep coming. And sometimes you're like, the inner critic is like, oh, I can't do that. Or like, oh, I'm only getting this, many likes, or like nobody's coming to my website. And now I kind of, not that I don't look at the metrics, but I kind of try not to get too wrapped up in it, because I know that that's my ego.
Getting out of your own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We just got to show up and do the best we can do, and leave the results up to whoever it is,
Right.
And I think that is sort of the theme of what we're talking about here, is belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we didn't feel like we belonged when we were drinking and using, and then we get sober and we're really lost. It's very difficult to feel like you belong somewhere. And even online in the Instagram world, you can feel that way. And I know you talk about that. I know you talk about that. So how do you belong in this crazy world? Give me some tips.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any like tips. It's funny because my husband is really an introvert, right? And I'm kind of I'm an empath and a highly sensitive person. So I need to recharge, and I need like to re-energize on my own, but I can be extroverted if I need to. But stuff like this is still out of my comfort zone. But I think for me, my sober account didn't really take off for the first, like, I don't know, 8 months or 9 months or a year or something. And then all of a sudden something went viral around Christmas last year. And like, I got like, I want to say like 4,000 followers in like a month. And I was like, but I'd always posted the same content. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but I do actually put captions. I don't do a lot of like reels and stuff, because it's more authentic to me as a writer, to just
whatever floats your boat and becomes your trademark at the end of the day. It's your brand.
Right.
But you have to think about it. You don't have to follow the crowd. Signify that signature, which is synonymous with you as a person, which speaks to your personality, which in this case is the writing voice. You know the saying as well as I, and Danny as well included. If they say the pen is mightier than the sword, what then do we say about the QWERTY keyboard? Or, for that fact, the ergonomic keyboard? What about the microphone? So whatever it is that signifies you, do that because it comes to you naturally. It's quintessentially the definition of talent. So you carved yourself a very specific sort of niche, and you can already tap yourself on the shoulder, if you don't mind me saying so.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I think for me, what I find about building a place of belonging or a community is when you engage with people, you find your people, and I find that I try to, not that I try to consciously reply to every comment, but I kind of just do, because I find there's people out there. I remember how lonely it was and how I felt like nobody understood me. I felt really misunderstood. I felt really like I was drifting. So I dissociated a lot from the experiences of my life. And I think now when people come my way and they talk about things that are familiar to me like that, I feel like they just need someone to listen and someone to say me too, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind
Yeah.
of what I do. Yeah.
Honest question from me to you. When you started your writing work, what was your initial point of interest that you wanted to put something to pen to paper? What topics?
So when I originally started out, I'd always claimed I wanted to be a writer when I was in active addiction, but I never finished a book, right? Like I'd fall asleep with my drink and my book, ever like, wake up the next morning, never finished anything, could never commit to a writing assignment because I would never,
I
like, I'd
see.
hit a deadline or whatever. But for me, last year I thought I had an idea for a thriller book, and that's a genre that I really,
Oh,
and this idea still lives here. I have the poster boards over there with all the characters and stuff like
thanks for
that.
that, Danny.
Thriller.
Yes,
Mind blown.
that idea took the back burner. So then the thought, what I've started now is a memoir, and
Oh,
am working on my memoir slowly.
neat.
Yeah.
Very good
So-
for
Well,
you.
as they
That's
say,
amazing.
the tortoise beat the hare.
Yeah. Right. It's gonna come, and actually I have a piece coming out for publication in a compilation, a book that's coming out later
Wow.
this spring. There's 11 authors. It's a sobriety based book.
Okay.
It's a 3,000 to 5,000 word essay. So mine's actually around 5,000 words, but I was really honored to be a part of that and to get asked to be a part of that. So that's kind of, I took a little bit of my memoir and I sort of reworked it into something small, which is hard with that word count. I don't know if you remember trying to write something that length, but it's hard to condense stuff into.
Well, I've written
Yes.
bulletins for about 200 words, but nowhere near 5,000. It was already a mission to come up with 200 words in just under 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, or it's
Very.
hard to condense something, to think about your whole sobriety journey and then to put it in something so much shorter. It's like, how do you do that?
And let me guess, it's because your mind often shoots in many different directions and you struggle to piece everything chronologically. How far am I off the money?
Oh, it's so true. I posted a reel about my ADHD today and how it's like a squirrel, because I feel like
Shazam.
constantly different things going through my head, and it's like it can be exhausting at times, but it is
Oh,
a
of
gift.
course.
It's a gift because I have so many ideas, and in sobriety I can actually follow through with a lot of them.
Sure.
So where did you
Is
get
right.
all of your knowledge in sobriety? Sorry. I was, you haven't been sober, just a few years, but you have really learned a lot, enough to write and help people and kind of do that. So how did you get sober? Like, what happened? What was your final moment? And then who's been with you on your sober journey? Is this just your journey on your own, or where have you been kind of seeking this inner superwoman, like he said?
It's kind of, I guess it's kind of an enigma when you say it like that, but I got sober through something called the Luckiest Club. I don't know if you all have heard of that. There was a book, Laura McCowan published a book called We Are the Luckiest. When the pandemic hit, she set up these free Zoom meetings, and I'd been trying to moderate. I'd ended up in the ER multiple times in that year before that. And I tried some local AA meetings, and I didn't really click with any of them. And when that book came around, I read it secretly at the gym. I remember reading it on my phone. And then I found a podcast that her and Holly did, who wrote Quit Like a Woman.
Yeah.
And I was just inspired by this whole kind of movement of women who were getting sober. And some of them weren't even getting sober necessarily because they identified as alcoholics or because they had a low rock bottom. They were just getting sober because it was a lifestyle choice. And for me, it wasn't.
Oh.
It was both, but that's how I got sober. And then the other thing is, I think I've just always had a voracious propensity to learn. So some people avoid doing the quote unquote work of sobriety for like a long time, or they're dry drunk or whatever. I just kind of like dove in, not necessarily to like all the trauma related stuff, but I dove into building a new life that didn't include alcohol. And that was the key. I met a lot of people for a long time. For the first few months, I went to those meetings. I kept my camera off. Like I was still drinking. I remember listening to those meetings on like Friday night with my drink and being like, okay, next week I'll try. Well, next week. And finally, Halloween had been one of the biggest drinking nights out for me and my girlfriends. And I didn't go out that year. I'd been trying to avoid that scene. I drank at home alone, which was like pretty much what I did for the last few years of my drinking. And I woke up that next day and it was kind of what you said, Danielle. It was like this like inner voice. Something said to me like, it's time. It's just time. You can do this. It's I guess the surrender that a lot of people talk about. And I put it down, and that was it. It was hard. I had withdrawal. I had to do medical kind of stuff, but that was the beginning of the end. So
never nice, is it?
Wow. No, it was it was messy, but you know what? I had to, because I was pretty much blacking out every time that I drank. There was things happening in my life that kept kind of adding up, and I was like,
then.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask next, going from the semi-positive to the positive. Have you always been writing ever since your dark days? Was that your profession of choice, or was it just something of a fact of you wanted to try this and you're going for it now flat out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It was kind of both. In my head, I was always a writer. When I was younger, before alcohol became a problem, I had dreams of doing that. When I first got out of high school, I went to college for journalism, but I only lasted like 6 months. And I met a guy, he was British, and he said, hey, do you want to come move to England for a bit?
I'm going to shut my mic.
Yeah. So I moved to England for 7.5 years. I lived in Reading and I lived in Maidenhead and did that, traveled around. And that whole time I was writing little pieces here and there, but I worked in recruitment for a long time. I kind of did that, human resources. And then when I became a single parent, I really just worked like retail jobs. I worked in a pet store. My ex didn't support our daughter at all. So it was really
Sorry to hear.
Yeah, it was just up to me until I met my husband, and that kind of changed. We immigrated to the States. I'm Canadian, so I grew up.
I wanted to say, I noticed so in your accent.
Yeah. So
Whereabouts from Canada are you from?
Yeah. Sorry?
Whereabouts from Canada are you from?
I grew up in Edmonton, in Alberta.
Oh, Alberta. A friend of mine lives there.
Oh, whereabouts?
Edmonton.
Oh, in Edmonton. Oh, okay.
In Edmonton.
Cool. Yeah. It's very, very cold there. I don't think I could ever move back there. Like, I'm really cold, like negative 35 or 40 in the winter. Daniela's like, no.
I'm South African. I won't know.
No, it's not. I live in Pennsylvania now, and it's cold-ish here, but it's not like that.
I couldn't.
Well, we're switching over to the fall season, and I can tell you, it's terrible business. It's terrible business. I'm not a winter guy whatsoever. I'm missing the spring and the summertime.
I like the fall, but not the winter.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
So I want to go back to the ADHD thing, because you stop the drinking and the alcohol, and then you have the other disorders and whatever you want to call them, dual diagnosis, whatever you want to call it, and they have medications. They have Adderall. They have, I don't really know what they have, but I know that is one of them. So a lot of people, they don't like, or they frown on people that take Adderall because it's a stimulant, or if it's a controlled substance. Yeah. So that is something I've noticed. Like for me, I take antidepressants, they're not stimulants, but even people I've seen have a problem with that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's, what has your experience been? Have you seen a lot of people kind of judging the mental illness area, for some of the people you've
Yeah.
been working with? Or
I think so. I personally don't take any medication for my ADHD. I have a past history with drug abuse as well. And for me, it just wasn't an option. I took antidepressants off and on, Lexapro, over the years, but the problem was I was taking it when I was drinking, and it's not as effective. We all know, like, it's not
yeah.
doing. And it turns out I wasn't actually depressed. It was the alcohol. So I have anxiety issues and I have ADHD, right? But in talking to other people, and I have nothing against the medication, and a lot of people I talk to who reach out on my posts like that, they're like, oh, my family thinks this is, a step backwards, or it means that I'm not sober, or it means that I can never get sober. But meanwhile, they're having trouble functioning in their daily lives. And it's like, at what point do you want to help people and think to yourself, if they're not, for example, if they're depressed and they're told by everyone in their life that they can't take those antidepressants because they would be cheating, they can't get out of bed and they can't function. What kind of a life is that, So I think it's such a personal thing, and I think the
It
stigma
is.
around it is so prevalent still, but yet like masked a little bit too. That's been
Well,
my
to give you another example, I mean, I'm a cancer survivor, and when I went for treatment for stage 3, I didn't go through the conventional route, which was chemo and radiation, because
Mhm.
I was forewarned by my specialist if I do it, I would risk the cancer spreading, because ultimately, what does radiation do? It multiplies. Think about the atom bomb. When it
Mhm.
hits the surface, it ultimately spreads. And that's
Mhm.
the common risk with cancer treatment, even though it's the most well known, most commercialized, and the most, I almost want to use the word susceptible,
Mhm.
but the most common, rather,
The most
form of
common.
treatment for cancer. It has a 51 risk rate.
Mhm.
So, obviously, when
Wow.
I did something which is
Ooh.
more alternative treatment, obviously, frowns played out on the face, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So there is always going to be those naysayers, because what's the common rule? People fear what they don't understand. Let
Right.
that on your mind a little bit.
Oh
That's
yeah.
why I've always said to people, what works for you works for you. And who am I, as a person who might not know that conventional treatment success rate? And I mean, there's medical journals up the, excuse my French, up the wazoo, that you can
Mhm.
go and search online to go and educate yourself with. Otherwise, shut up.
Well, and the other part of that too that I've noticed is I get a lot of kind of subliminal stigma for the fact that I didn't get sober in AA. And
Okay.
I think it was just a product of, at the time, I tried a few home groups like in my area. This was right in the height of the pandemic, and I just didn't click with any of them, right? So for me, at least the way I see it, at least I got sober, right? And I'm still
Right.
sober, and I still, for me now, the foundation of my recovery now, I still believe that at some point I'll end up doing 12-step work because I believe in it foundationally. I just haven't, it hasn't fit into my recovery yet. And so I have
Fair.
other things like my
Okay.
morning routine, like I have very strong boundaries with like what time I go to bed and what time I wake up. And it's proven to be really
Well
helpful
done.
because I had no boundaries before. So
Right.
yeah, it's interesting
Again,
how
what
that
works for you
up.
works for you.
Right, right. Yeah.
People
But I
that
mean,
they
what's worse? Sitting in a room full of people, not knocking the establishment, but you can't mesh with those people because there's personality clashes. It's like two positive sides of a magnet. It's going
Hmm.
to push away, and it's going to cause more damage than what it is going to do any good, unfortunately, and people need to realize that. And no matter how you harden or soften your approach, you can polish a turd, but it will still remain a turd. And it's
And
not
it
just applicable in recovery, but as it is in business and in life.
right? And it puts a lot of people off getting sober, or it delays them getting sober for so long because
Correct.
because people will reach out. And to be honest, I would say 98% of the feedback and comments and messages I get on my social media are actually really positive. And I think I'm contributing towards showing that there is other ways to get sober. But I've done that by creating things like my little book club or like my writing community, outlets for people to process some of the things that they went through. So I don't just believe like, now I'm sober, I'm going to forget about all the other things. It's like, I'm very curious about why I drank, right? So discovering that why
honestly,
is huge.
the best thing about that is that in the process, you're staying sober because
Right.
and you're helping others.
Ding, 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 ding,
But in
ding,
the
ding.
meantime, you're not picking up a drink because you're helping these other people. And I think that is a
Right.
huge thing, not just in AA, but everywhere. Just being able to give back what was given to you. And sobriety is such a gift. It's so difficult to see when you're in your disease. And sometimes you can't see it unless you have a medical issue or you almost die and you're giving back. And that's keeping you sober. I just love that.
Right. And you don't even often think that you have any gifts or anything worth giving when you're in that. So having discovered that now, when I talk about helping people find belonging, it's helping people find in themselves what I found in me. So if I can reflect to them and be a mirror to them, that it's okay to show up and to fail at something, and it's okay to make mistakes. My social media is not perfect, for example. Like, I don't have a whatever kind of aesthetic to my grid or anything, and I
oh God.
And then I change my mind because that's my squirrel brain, right? So I'm like, whatever. I'm helping people, right? And I'm like, and I'm helping myself by sharing.
Squirrel brain. But Kezia, you just mentioned the word fail. Do you know that's my favorite word?
Yeah.
First, action in learning.
Yes.
So you never fail, you just find stuff that doesn't work for you. Remember I said that to you, Danny?
Yeah.
2 years ago. First, action in learning. Tell me about this book club. Do you guys discuss own writings, like what people have written, or do you discuss books by other authors? How does that more or less play out?
Yeah. So next month is actually our first one, and we're I always have stacks of books. We're doing Not Drinking Tonight, and she's Amanda White is Therapy for Women, and she's got an excellent account. But we are going to discuss, but I'm also going to have some writing exercises for them. I'm doing this one for women. In my writing community, I have exercises and both, basically both, and they write their own stuff, we share it, everything. Everything.
What does the future look like for you, do you think? I mean, this is 2 years and you're doing so much. What does your sobriety look like?
I think about that a lot now. I think about how I want my business to grow, and what I do, my work, really, not my business, but like what I do. I'm lucky that I had an opportunity to turn that into a business, and I'm in that stage right now of hustling pretty hard, to be honest with you. I'm working pretty hard right now. You guys know what that's like. But I
fair enough.
Yeah, but the next few years, my family and I have plans. We want to buy a house, and we just immigrated to the States, my daughter and I, like a year and a half ago. So it's kind of building the roots and the foundation of a life that I don't want to escape from. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. What that
just enjoying the ride.
Yeah, I think at some point I would like to clarify that, or maybe work with some sort of coach or something like that. But right now, it's me doing me, and it kind of it's just been really, really inspirational to work with the people in my writing communities and to hear their stories too. That keeps me humble, because it's like, we all have things that we're afraid of, like you said, the failing and whatever, but I see it as an opportunity. So I do a workshop where we talk about failing fearlessly, where it's like, the things we were afraid to do when we were drinking, or the way we beat ourselves up for the mistakes that we made. How can we now show up and turn those things around, or do something nice for someone, and make them feel welcome in a space? And that's kind of what I want to cultivate, is maybe more spaces and opportunities like that. My problem is that all those ideas come in and I'm like, I want to do this now and I want to do that. My husband's like, slow down, it's okay. And I'm like, so I have books of like my ideas and stuff.
Have you ever heard of a vision board?
Yeah, I've done. I have 3 for this year. I have 3 little
That was
ones.
just advice. That was just advice. Please, no judgment. I was just offering advice.
Don't get her started. She'll be
right. All the
Right. Kezia, whatever I said just now 2 sentences ago, scrap it. I'm an addict.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I have to really commend you. And I say this to every single guest who has done this show. You've got a lot to be proud of, identifying things that put you in a positive frame of mind, that makes you proactive, that makes you want to get up and take on the new day. It's very rare that someone, pardon me, of 2 years can identify those where it's now a fact of, now I just want to stay away from what's killing me, to the why and the how, resulting in the what. And we all know that who is the form following the function of what. And you can really give yourself a big attagirl for what you have done. And you know what? If no one else says it, I'm sure you have your network of supporters. I support everyone that crosses my path. I'm excited to see what's happening in your life next.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm really grateful for opportunities to speak with people like you guys, because I just think that our message can reach so many people that we don't even realize sometimes. And there could be, I'm pretty vocal about sharing when I'm sharing my story or whatever. And whether that's
Sure.
self-promotion or not, I feel like the amount of the ripple effect that you get from that is what is going to change this for people. And for me, like, I'm breaking generational curse, not from before me, but like, I'm not passing this down to my daughter. So she was 5 when I got sober, and she might one day forget about all of that, right? She might not remember. Right now she remembers me drinking, and that's like part of my motivation to continue with what I'm doing as well. So
really...
Just an idea from me to you. Have you perhaps considered writing poetry apart from prose?
I have some poetry that I did have a poetry account for a while on Instagram called the Unmuted Collective, and there's some poetry.
I had to ask.
I wrote a lot of poetry in early sobriety, and I was going to write a whole chapbook, and then I realized that there was no like cohesive kind of thread through it. So I'm like, how would I publish, this? But
all the best poets of the Beat generation were lucid. Why would you be any different?
Yeah. It could still come back. There's some great poets in my writing community that write like haiku and stuff. And for me,
neat.
I'm not a numbers person, so I'm like 575. Like, I'm trying to remember, and I'm like, it's all free verse, Yeah. So one day,
Danny, I've been talking too much. You should also get a turn.
I just love sitting back and listening to people's stories. I've been in recovery for almost 15 and a half years, and it's a wild ride. It just keeps surprising me. More and more and more keeps being revealed. And I look back at mistakes, and I'm able to really remember what that consequence was of that action.
Yeah.
Instead of constantly, not breaking that habit and going over and over and over and dating people that would cheat, or I never thought I would get married. I mean, that's something I never thought.
Me
I got
neither.
married.
Me neither. I literally never. I got married last year. I was 39, so I'm 40 now, and
No way.
Yeah, I didn't think I would ever get. We got married in Vegas last year, and which was hard too for like, I'm not introverted, but like, that's a lot of people, right? And I love my husband loves Vegas. So that was his dream. So I'm like, okay. And we were just there in February, and going to Vegas as a sober person, I've been twice now, and it's like next level, right? Because if you feel kind of like a badass. You're like, I actually managed to survive in the desert, where you can feel like untethered a little bit. That's actually the title of my upcoming essay, is Untethered, because that's I didn't feel true freedom. I thought I did when I was drinking, but I didn't until I got sober. And now what I was doing was dissociating. I thought I was just being this like hedonistic, carefree hippie, having relationships with all sorts of men.
Who you never.
And now I'm like, oh, this is what freedom is, where I can wake
Mm.
up in the morning and not worry that I've said anything or done anything to hurt anybody, anything like that is just, it's such a good, and being able to show up, like if someone called me and needed me to drive to them, I could drive. That never gets old. I'm like, okay, I can help somebody, so those are the gifts that I think it just, I mean, obviously you have 15 and a half years. Like there must be constant surprises, like you say, where you're like, oh, I can do this because I'm sober, or because I didn't pick up a drink today, this door opened for me, and I think that's
It's
where I'm
very
at.
true. I was in the doctor's today, and it's just the simple little things that people say. You
Mm-hmm.
can, doesn't matter, 15 years, you can go off the rails and you will.
Yeah.
You can be on that pink cloud, but to stay on that pink cloud is not very healthy. You
No.
have to feel, the Mark Twain quote, you were talking about it earlier, the fear. You
Mm-hmm.
can't really have courage of fear if you don't write it out and
Mm-hmm.
feel the fear. Then you
Mm.
have
Right.
that courage.
Right.
And life has just kept on going. And I feel like I've been able to really, really, I was a very talkative, very in your face person. Not because I wanted to be the front runner, just because I had always been that way. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me to sit back, to learn humility, to just stop and pause, like the little
Mm-hmm.
kitty paws. I used to have those on my window.
I
I
love it.
gave them to my husband too.
Yeah.
Pause, honey, when pause when agitated. But
I love it.
uh, to be able to sit back and not say anything right away and think about my thoughts
Yeah.
is something very new for me. And it helps a lot not to hurt other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gotten to be such a simple life for me. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's chaotic. It's
Yeah.
very chaotic right now. There's a lot going on. However, it's the simple things, the bike rides, the
Yeah.
watering my plants, that stuff that you
Yeah.
would never even think of, that
And
is
like you
just so
said,
enjoyable.
and it's like, when I think about when I was drinking, I always wanted to be at the best parties and be seen with the best people and be, the coolest
Mm.
person there. And it was all a facade, right? But when I think back on that, it was because I had this like overwhelming social anxiety, first of all, and undiagnosed ADHD and all these things that I couldn't wrap my head around. So I feel like I moved out of home when I was 17, and I feel like my maturity in a lot of ways halted at that point. I always was like wanting to be fiercely independent and separate from my family. So I left and I got a big girl job. I did that like few weeks or a few months in journalism, and I was like, see you later, I'm moving to England. Always disconnected. My family still lives on the other side of the country, right? Well, they live in a different country, but the other side of the continent. And I was just always kind of drifting. I was traveling. I went to like, 40 countries. I did all that stuff, but I always felt like I didn't belong anywhere. And so for me to now find that in sobriety in myself, it doesn't matter where I am, I feel like I belong, is like, that's what I want other people to find. And I didn't have a voice to even elucidate that until I got sober. So now I want people to find that however long it takes them, or whatever little baby steps that they need to take. Like you were saying, to your point about having to face some of that stuff, you can't get to where you want to be if you don't start doing that at some point. And it can be little tiny steps at looking at things in the past. But I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't look at the reasons why you drank. You need to
Yes.
figure out who you were underneath that, who you were before all of that trauma or whatever happened to you. You need to find that person and bring yourself to life in the now version, you know?
So from being a vagabond to a rebel, in other words.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, thank goodness you took it lightheartedly.
It's
amazing how intuitive we are once we get sober. Like you said, you were an
Isn't it?
empath. Did you always believe that, or did you just start actually feeling this after you got sober?
I don't think I even knew that word, to be honest with you. I know the word empathy, but that's different slightly to being an empath. And I think what happens is if you find a community in sobriety, I met people who were like me. I have I only have a few chat threads on my phone because it gets too wild. Like I can't deal with it. But one of
all
them,
that traffic.
one of them, there's 6 of us women, and we call it the Sober Coven, and we're all kind of a little witchy, right? And they are much more so, and I respect the hell out of these women because they'll, like, any ailment, I'm like, hey ladies, what do I do for this? And they're like, put little containers of salt in the corners of your house and gargle with salt water and get the crystals. And I'm like, okay. So I do all this stuff, and you want to sage your So I do all this, right? But through meeting people like that, I realized that I was an empath. And that's helped me in my relationship with my husband because I always would connect with unavailable men. And I think he was the first one that came along. And I think he has a lot to do with why I'm sober as well. He was my angel at that time when he believed in me, but he also didn't know about me. We lived in different countries, right? So he didn't realize I had this big secret that I was keeping from him. And when he realized, he took it in stride, and he helped me feel okay to get sober. I announced my 1-year sobriety on my Facebook, and none of his family really knew about it. So there was like kind of some backlash on that, and I had hurt feelings over some things and stuff. And again, we kind of rode that wave. Whereas if I'd been drinking, all hell would have broken loose. Like there would have been a rift in the family, right? Like I would have been like, I don't want to talk to my in-laws or whatever. So yeah, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And
that's the origin of romance, sticking through thick and thin.
Yeah.
Through high tide and low blow.
Yeah. Yeah. But you don't find those people. I don't think you find those people until you can be comfortable in your skin. And for me, that took putting down substances. I couldn't be comfortable in my skin. I was always wanting to crawl out of my skin and be someone else, and be a chameleon situation. So.
I love that. That makes so much sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, you deserve it. I mean, every good story has a happy ending, but not just a happy ending, but there's a new book waiting to be written. And right now you're at that index, I think, of that new book that's now being penned.
Yeah.
And, keep on discovering, keep on finding those new things that makes Kezia tick. I keep telling a lot of people who come to me for either career advice and or otherwise, I keep on telling them, find the things that make you you. What is it that makes Kezia tick? Take Kezia's brain apart. What did Kezia enjoy before boozing? What did Kezia enjoy before insert whatever cataclysmic event caused Kezia's thinking to go completely off the rails? And naturally they look at me with fish eyes, but eventually, naturally after a period of introspection like we've just discussed, then they come back to me and say, oh, now I understand. Remember, life is a game. If you're not having fun, you're doing life wrong.
Right. There's so much to be learned. And I think my days were so similar when I was drinking. Maybe it was a different bar or a different person or whatever, but it was always it was like Groundhog Day all the time, because I would always just break my own heart every single day. I would do something that I was so out of alignment, you know. It was like Groundhog Day, though. I feel like that's what when I think about, because now there's particular events that stand out, and those are the ones that I'm working through. But on
Sure.
the general, like those, you know, 7 or 8 years that were really bad, it could all be summed up in like one day. Like it was all, and that's why I try not to be hard on myself. And I tell people, I'm like, you
Good
are
on you, girl.
experiencing human things, and you got addicted to an
Mm.
addictive substance or what have you, right? So you were experiencing things as a human, and part of that is learning and making mistakes as well. So
But are you also at that stage where you can look at certain points, not all of them, but certain events in your life that played out, and you can actually just, laugh at yourself at how you acted in contrast previously, and today you're more of a fact of, I can't believe I acted this way.
yeah,
Silly me.
right. Or you can share that with other. I share pretty honestly a lot of my stories on my Instagram, and people are always like, wow, like I could never. And my mom follows, she's probably watching this right now, but she follows my social media really closely. And my handle is the Sober Elephant Chronicles. And the
Sweet.
my mom sent me the email that was kind of the catalyst the summer of 2020 for me getting sober. It was called the elephant in the room, like that expression. And that's then became the name. And elephants were my grandmother's favorite animal. So it all kind of like tied into this thing. And yeah, so that was like, I don't know. It was just, it's funny how all these things kind of like lead up to that event. But to me, looking at those events, being able to laugh at them, or being able to say, this is what I learned from it, and this is
Sure.
what I can share with other people, or how this has made me more in alignment and more authentic to who I am and how I want to show up in the world. I was constantly embarrassed of like how I showed up, or I was constantly disappointed in myself when I was drinking. And now it's like I still do stupid things, and I I'm still clumsy, and I'm still awkward, and I'm still whatever, right? But I can have fun with it now, and I can know that I'm just a human, you know.
And your daughter gets to see the side of that.
Yeah.
The
Which is
silly
the
her and
best
I,
part, I'm sure.
yeah, her and I, she was always there for me through that, but like that's been part of the hardest part, probably, is the guilt that goes along with the parenting stuff when I was in active addiction.
I can understand that.
But now being able to rebuild something, or build something from that rubble like that we had, is, and kids forgive you, and things, you always have that opportunity. Of course there's things that you can never undo them, right? But I can create new memories with her now. I can have a house where she never sees alcohol in this fridge or in this house. She never sees me and my husband drinking. And I think that to me is more important than the stuff that happened before, you know. Making amends, yes, but I think it's okay. I think we're okay, you know.
Living amends.
Yeah, exactly.
The best kind of apology is changed behavior.
Right. Yep. And kids know that too. Kids are so much more perceptive than we give them credit for, because sometimes even the stuff she remembers, it blows my mind that like she remembers things about when I was drinking, and I'm like, she knew that those weren't just like, you know, sodas in the fridge. Like those were my like mixed vodka drinks, or there was like the, you know, vodka in the freezer, or there was me falling asleep every day after school after I picked her up, me passing out, right? Things like that. She remembers, but it's in like an offhand way. It's not in a like, mommy, I hate you because you did this. It's like they'll just be telling a story and I'll be like, what? And it's usually things I remember, but every once in a while I'm like, this, because like I said, I was blacking out a lot of the times. Often she wasn't there, but sometimes I guess there was lapses in things that I was doing. So
yeah,
it's I'm so grateful that I don't have to live there anymore. Yeah.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
A very big blessing.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken me almost 15 and a half years to write my memoir, and I'm I'm two chapters in. No, I've written quite a few chapters. They were all horrible. And so I finally got some help, the help. And she said, I'm going to charge you $13,000. And we have an agent that's interested. and
Yeah.
we'll get money from him to finish it. I believed her.
Oh
And
no.
I'm still paying that car payment monthly to pay off the loan that I took out for these two
No.
chapters that no one will ever see. Maybe I should send them to you because they're pretty much written by me. She just kind of
Please
placed them
do.
so they look good.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
the publishing industry, this is what gets me about that is it can bleed you dry trying to get your work out into the world. And so when I was approached by this compilation, she said something they sent the contract over and it said you will get 1/11th of the royalties of the sale of the book, but not the author copies. So I buy a bunch of author copies and I sell. So I think the retail is going to be like $18.95. And I'm like, I don't even care about the 1/11th of the royalties. It was laughable at the time because I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't write it I never even thought I'd get this opportunity. So for me to have my writing out into the world, I was like, I would do it for free. So yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I think that's also why a lot of self-authors these days publish on things like Amazon because they get full
Yeah.
royalties and they cut out the middleman completely.
Yeah.
Plus, with the advent of Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
having things like summits and conferences and speakers talking for hours on end, what do you call that? A one-man, one-woman show, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Whereas in advance, you can send them your product, and all you do is you basically just kick up the fees of transport or courier.
Yeah.
So the method of having your work spread out is becoming so far and more diverse. And of
Well,
course, the personnel will bitch and moan and say that now they're losing their salary, but ipso facto, ergo, you're the reason why.
right.
So, like
I
it or
think
lump it, it's here to stay.
Well, I think what I'm doing, and I guess what you've kind of done, Daniela, is like you can leverage your social media presence once the time comes, once you get, more chapters or what have you.
Right.
That's what I said to my husband. I'm like, eventually these are going to be the people who are reading my
Yeah.
memoir, right? And he's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And I was like, I'm not, by that point, by the time I write it, I would have built like a strong relationship with these people years from now, right? And they're going to be invested. They're going to be engaged. They're going to want to read that because little snippets of what I write in my captions and stuff is sometimes stuff that ends up in my memoir in some form or another too. So to me, it's all writing for the same purpose. It's whether
That's
it's in a
great.
book one day, I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Gary V. I love Gary V. I don't know if you know who he is.
yeah, yeah,
And you're documenting your sobriety, your journey, and
mhm,
you're putting it out there because that's how I found you because I always see your Instagram and I
yeah,
always watch your videos and your stuff.
yeah.
And I don't do a whole lot of scrolling and watching on Instagram anymore. And
There.
we get so busy, honestly. But
Oh,
I do look at yours and a few others, and I just love how I wish I could do those videos. Like even just the simple ones, just the little things and the music, because you'll always have those and you could put them on TikTok and Twitter
mm,
and Facebook and everything. Even later, that
yeah,
quote
yeah,
from your book, when it becomes a bestseller, you'll be able to shoot out and say, this is from 2022. And it's just,
yeah.
there's so much opportunity. It's so different these days. We
Oh yeah,
can make ourselves not famous, but we can build our brand so
absolutely.
Mm.
easily if we want to.
Absolutely.
Hard work every day.
Yeah. It is hard. That's what when I said about the hustle, I don't, it's not necessarily just the posts, but there's a lot of engagement. There's a lot of energy exchange because you put yourself out there every day. And when people realize that you're putting out content that's helpful, they'll come to you for help. So then word gets around that, this person helps, or I
Mm.
go up on the explore page a lot and then someone will reach out about something. And I've had, like I said, 98% of those have been really positive engagement, and my following is 87% female, which on my old Instagram account, how I met my husband through Instagram was like, I want to say 99% male following, right? So to me,
Wow.
I've a brand for myself based on something authentic and something genuine, right? Because I'm like, I looked at those a few months ago, and I was like, because I thought to myself, I don't get creepy messages very often or anything like that. And knock on wood, because now it will happen, you know. But I get that. Yeah.
Authentic. Living that authentic life.
Yeah.
Were you the ghostwriter? No, Chris, shut up. Sorry about that.
It's true.
It's been so awesome to have you on. And
This has been wonderful.
Chris and I
I
both.
concur. Kezia, you're a star.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
would love to see you back after a memoir and check back in
Absolutely.
with you. You're on your way, and you're not looking back.
Beyond the stars.
And it's a pursuit of happiness, and you're on it. And I know what it feels like, and I love that excitement in that that time that you're in right now. Really enjoy it, and just take it all in.
Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
Time.
Oh, I love that. Oh, you guys, thank you. I will
Only
definitely.
a pleasure, darling.
I would love to come back. This has been a lot of fun. Yeah. This has been really good. I was worried. I'm not good with technology. I'm like, when I messaged you today, I was like, what do I do? And you're like, it's nice. And you were just like, I'll resend you the email. It was all in there. I just didn't read the fine print. I was like, oh, okay. So I just wanted to make it easy for people to, like, some people wanted to just go on YouTube and watch it. So I was like, I'll just do that. So
remember, what the large print giveth, the small print taketh away.
Right. Oh, it has been amazing. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity.
And that was Doing It Sober Live with Kezia Calvert. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back again next week, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Please hit us up with those questions for our guest. And if you've got anything lined up for us, we would love to hear from you. Until we speak again next week, look after yourself and God bless.